This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one country, one leader, or one decision. This is about something quieter and far more dangerous. It's about a system that no longer tolerates standing still. A system where neutrality isn't respected. It's punished. For years, we were told that staying balanced was strength, that you could trade with everyone, speak to everyone, align with no one, that middle powers could survive by being careful. That assumption is now failing, silently, systematically. What looks like diplomacy on the surface is already being read as defiance. What looks like symbolism is triggering consequences, and those consequences are arriving faster than anyone planned for. If you think this story is about ships, speeches, or summits, stay with me, because those are not the cause. They're the signal. What matters is what happens when a system decides you must choose, even if choosing breaks you. And once that pressure starts, it doesn't stop. It accelerates. Here is the mistake we keep making. We assume power still lives in people, in leaders, in governments, in choices. It doesn't. Power now lives in systems that react automatically, trade regimes, security alignments, financial access, narratives that trigger consequences without warning. No one needs to declare punishment anymore. The system does it on its own. Markets respond before diplomats speak. Tariffs move faster than negotiations. Reputation collapses before facts are checked. What matters is not what a country intends. It's how the system interprets movement. A gesture becomes alignment. Silence becomes consent. Balance becomes betrayal. And once that interpretation locks in, reversing it is almost impossible because the system isn't designed for nuance. It's designed for sorting inside or outside. This is why middle powers are the most exposed. Too visible to ignore, too dependent to resist, too important to be left alone. And once the system starts sorting you, it doesn't ask if you're ready. The most dangerous changes don't arrive loudly. They arrive politely. They arrive framed as continuity before alignment was explicit. You signed treaties. You joined blocs. You crossed visible lines. Now, alignment is inferred from who you train with, who you host, who you don't publicly distance yourself from. Before neutrality bought time, it created leverage. It allowed maneuvering. Now, neutrality creates suspicion. The shift didn't happen overnight. It was normalized step by step. Economic tools became political tools. Legal forums became strategic weapons. Narratives replaced declarations. Nothing officially changed, and that's why it worked. Because when systems change quietly, people keep acting on old assumptions. They think delay is safety. They think ambiguity is protection. But the system has already updated its rules. It no longer asks what you mean. It measures where you drift. And by the time that drift becomes visible, the response is already underway, which is why the next moment matters, because it looks small. And it won't stay that way. Then something concrete happens, something physical, something impossible to ignore. Assets move. They arrive publicly. They stay just long enough to be noticed. Officially, it's cooperation, routine, peaceful, defensive. But the system doesn't read intentions. It reads proximity, who is present, who is absent, who didn't say no. What follows isn't an announcement. It's a recalculation. Risk models adjust. Trade assumptions shift. Political patience evaporates. No sanctions are announced on day one. No ultimatum is delivered. No red line is declared. That comes later. First comes uncertainty. Investors hesitate. Partners quietly reassess exposure. The country at the center insists nothing has changed. That this is being misread. That balance is still possible. And maybe it is for a moment, But once a system begins preparing for punishment, it doesn't need proof. It only needs precedent. And now that precedent exists, which raises the question no one wants to answer yet. What happens when the response finally arrives? Here's what's actually happening beneath the surface. And it's not ideological. It's mechanical. The system doesn't punish with outrage. It punishes with asymmetry. One side absorbs cost instantly. Jobs, access, confidence. The other side absorbs almost nothing. This is how coercion works now. Not through confrontation, through leverage imbalance. Middle powers depend on markets they don't control. Supply chains, they didn't design. Legal frameworks, they didn't write. So when pressure is applied, it doesn't look like force. It looks like adjustment. A tariff here, a preference removed there, a delay, a review. Each move is defensible in isolation. None of them look like retaliation. But together, they drain capacity. What's crucial is who benefits from this design. Not the loudest actor, the quietest, those who can apply pressure without paying for it, those who can wait, and those who can afford for uncertainty to linger, because uncertainty doesn't hurt everyone equally. It crushes the ones who need stability most, which is why the next phase isn't symbolic anymore. It's structural, and it moves faster than debate. Then the pace changes. Statements shorten. Meetings cancel. Timelines compress. What once took months now takes days. Decisions are made without announcements. Consequences appear without explanations. A deal stalls. A credit line tightens. An exemption quietly expires. No one calls it punishment. Everyone feels it. The system doesn't escalate emotionally. It escalates efficiently. Pressure stacks. Small, precise, cumulative. Each move forces a response. Each response narrows options, and the margin for error disappears. This is where neutrality collapses. Not with a speech, with a spreadsheet, because at this stage, hesitation becomes visible, and visibility invites more pressure. The country at the center tries to slow things down, to clarify, to reassure. But reassurance only works when the system still trusts you, and that trust is already eroding. What replaces it isn't hostility. It's something colder. Calculation. Once that takes over, the question is no longer why this is happening. The question becomes how long it can be endured, and whether the damage stops before something else breaks. This is the moment where it stops being abstract, because this is where it reaches you. You don't see it as geopolitics. You feel it as delay, as uncertainty, as something quietly slipping, a contract that doesn't renew, a job that doesn't expand, prices that don't come back down. Nothing dramatic happens all at once. That's the trick. You're told this is temporary, that markets are adjusting, that patience is required. But patience is a luxury when stability is already thin. You did not vote for alignment. You did not authorize confrontation. And yet your life is now inside the consequences. This is how systemic pressure works. It never asks for consent. It only counts exposure. If you're still watching, stay with me. Because what you're feeling isn't accidental, and it isn't isolated. It's the signal that the system has moved past theory and into enforcement. And once enforcement begins, it doesn't reverse easily, which brings us to what happens next. When this pressure stops being local, once pressure becomes visible, it doesn't stay contained. Other countries notice. Not the speeches, the consequences. They watch what happens to access, to trade terms, to diplomatic patience, and they adjust. Quietly, deals are rerouted, risk is repriced. Alternatives are tested. Not because they agree, because they don't want to be next. This is how a local recalculation becomes global. Not through declarations, through imitation. Middle powers begin hedging harder. Some lean in. Some pull away. Everyone starts asking the same question. What does the system punish now? And once that question spreads, alignment stops being ideological. It becomes defensive. This is where blocs start to harden, not because trust increases, but because fear does. The space between sides shrinks. The room for ambiguity disappears. What once looked like flexibility now looks like risk. And risk is something systems eliminate, which means the pressure you're watching isn't peaking, it's propagating. And when pressure propagates, it doesn't move in straight lines. It moves unpredictably toward the future phase no one wants to name yet. From here, the system only offers 3 paths. None of them are clean. The first is adjustment, careful recalibration, signals sent quietly, positions softened without admission. This path buys time, not relief, and time is expensive. The second is erosion, slow normalization of pressure, losses absorbed as routine, capacity drained without collapse. Nothing breaks. Everything weakens. This is the path most systems slide into by default because it feels survivable until it isn't. The third is rupture, not sudden, not theatrical. A threshold is crossed, an assumption fails. A response triggers something irreversible. Markets don't wait for clarity. Allies don't wait for explanation. And recovery doesn't follow the old rules. The danger isn't choosing the wrong path. It's believing you're choosing at all. Because systems like this don't negotiate futures. They narrow them, and once options are narrowed far enough, movement becomes momentum. Momentum becomes direction, and direction becomes fate, which is why the final question isn't what will happen next. It's whether anyone still has the space to stop it. There's a temptation at this point to look for resolution, a deal, a reset, a moment where pressure eases and balance returns. But systems like this don't offer closure. They offer inertia. Once momentum takes over, stopping it requires cost, real cost, paid up front. And the hardest part is this. The warning signs never look decisive when they appear. They look manageable. They look familiar. By the time they feel urgent, options have already narrowed. What you're watching isn't one country losing influence. It's a preview of how this system treats anyone caught between dependence and defiance. Today, it's visible in one place. Tomorrow, it won't be. If you think this ends with a choice being made, you're already behind the curve. The real danger is that the system may decide for everyone, quietly, efficiently, without asking. If you want to understand what happens next, not just here, but everywhere this pressure spreads, don't stop now. Because this story doesn't resolve, it migrates, and the next chapter is already forming, whether anyone is ready or not.